Stalingrad, winter 1942. Imagine a city ground into dust, factories without roofs, streets buried in rubble, the air so cold your breath freezes on the barrel of a rifle. German and Soviet soldiers fight room to room, floor to floor, over piles of brick that used to be homes. In this hellscape, one kind of warrior suddenly becomes terrifyingly important: the sniper. Hidden in shattered windows, buried under collapsed staircases, perched inside twisted steel, they wait for hours for a single shot, one pull of the trigger that can change the fate of a unit, a street, sometimes even a battle. Among these ghost-like figures, one name would become legendary: Vasily Zaitsev, the shepherd-turned-sniper from the Urals. His supposed duel with a German master marksman, Major König, has been retold in books, films, and video games. But how much of this story is deadly reality, and how much is carefully crafted myth? Let's step into the ruins and find out. To understand the sniper showdown at Stalingrad, we need to see the bigger picture. The battle itself was one of the bloodiest in human history. For over 5 months, German and Soviet forces tore each other apart in brutal close-quarters combat. Streets changed hands multiple times a day. Soldiers froze, starved, and bled in the same ruined buildings. In this chaos, snipers became both a psychological weapon and a practical necessity. They pinned down enemy units, protected approaches, and turned every exposed movement into a potential death sentence. That's the world Vasily Zaitsev stepped into when he arrived in Stalingrad in late 1942. We're going to follow his story, the mysterious arrival of his supposed German rival, and the deadly 3-day duel said to have followed. Along the way, we'll also look at what the documents really say. So if you're into deep, no-nonsense history, stick with this video to the end, and consider subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss future deep dives. Vasily Zaitsev didn't start life with a rifle in a ruined city. He started as a shepherd boy in the Ural Mountains. From a young age, he learned to shoot while hunting with his grandfather, saving ammunition by making every bullet count. This upbringing shaped the calm, patient style that later defined him as a sniper. When Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Zaitsev volunteered for the Navy and was eventually reassigned to the Red Army's 62nd Army defending Stalingrad. At first, he served as a simple infantryman, but his commanders soon noticed his marksmanship. According to Soviet accounts, Zaitsev killed multiple German soldiers with a single rifle borrowed from a comrade. Impressed, his superiors transferred him to a sniper unit. From that moment, he began carefully recording his kills, learning to blend with rubble, and using the city's twisted architecture as both shield and weapon. By late autumn 1942, his personal tally would already number in the hundreds, and the frontline rumor mill began to whisper his name. Zaitsev's skill alone doesn't fully explain his rapid rise to fame. Soviet propaganda plays a huge role. In Stalingrad, the Red Army needed heroes, living symbols to prove that the Germans could be stopped, even pushed back. A humble shepherd-turned-sniper was perfect. Soviet newspapers and frontline leaflets began publishing stories about Zaitsev, listing his confirmed kills, describing his patience and cunning. They showed him training young snipers, transforming ordinary soldiers into deadly marksmen. The message was clear: with discipline and courage, anyone could become a weapon powerful enough to halt the invader. This was more than storytelling. It was a psychological tool aimed at both soldiers and civilians, keeping morale alive in a city of ghosts. In that swirl of myth-making, the idea of a dramatic duel, a personal contest between the Soviet hero and a German counterpart, was almost inevitable. The stage was set for the arrival of a new character: the mysterious German sniper known as Major König. So who was Major König? According to Zaitsev's memoirs and later Soviet accounts, the Germans were alarmed by his growing kill count and the demoralizing effect it had. In response, they supposedly sent their own elite sniper, a man named Erwin König, sometimes called Koning or König, director of a prestigious sniper school in Berlin. This German marksman is described as cold, methodical, and highly trained, the pinnacle of Wehrmacht sniper doctrine. His mission: hunt down and eliminate Zaitsev in the ruins of Stalingrad. It's a perfect narrative, two masters meeting in a deadly duel, each representing their nation's pride. But even as we walk through the story, keep a question in mind. What evidence do we actually have that König existed? Outside Soviet and later Russian accounts, mention of him becomes suspiciously thin. Still, in the fog of war and the hunger for legends, the idea of a German super sniper felt believable, and the Red Army embraced it. The hunt, they say, was on. The duel, as told by Zaitsev and later retellings, begins when Soviet scouts and snipers notice a pattern. Their best marksmen are being picked off one by an invisible enemy. The shots are precise, the positions expertly chosen, the timing almost uncanny. Captain Danilov, Zaitsev's political officer, who appears later in fictionalized form, is said to have urged him to find and destroy this German ace. According to the story, it becomes personal not just for Zaitsev, but for the Soviet sniper corps as a whole. This is no longer just survival, it's a contest of prestige and will. Zaitsev and his spotter, Nikolai Kulikov, begin systematically studying the battlefield. They scan potential vantage points, watch for telltale glints of glass, subtle movements in the ruins, disturbed snow, any clue that might betray the Germans' nest. Stalingrad's shattered landscape turns into a three-dimensional chessboard, where every brick pile and metal beam hides potential death. The question is, who will see first? The city itself shapes the duel. Stalingrad isn't open fields or forest, it's a vertical maze. Broken staircases lead to nowhere, collapsed ceilings create new sightlines, and every shell crater offers both cover and trap. According to Zaitsev's account, the German sniper, presumably König, uses this landscape expertly. He chooses positions that allow him to fire and then disappear, forcing Soviet snipers to guess at his true location. Zaitsev responds by thinking like a hunter. He looks not just for where the German fired from, but for where he would logically move next. They say the duel stretches across several days. Each side tries decoys, helmets on sticks, mirrors, deliberate movements to lure out a shot. Both snipers know one exposed eye, one fraction of a second of carelessness, means instant death. Stalingrad, already a charnel house, becomes the silent audience for this microscopic war within a war. Two men locked in a contest most soldiers around them never even see. In Zaitsev's telling, the duel narrows down to a specific section of the factory district, often identified as the area around the Stalingrad metallurgical plant or similar industrial zones. Early one morning, a Soviet soldier is shot as he crosses open ground, and Zaitsev studies the angle of the wound and the direction of the bullet. He suspects the German is using a cunning trick, hiding not in a window, but under a piece of metal sheeting near a destroyed railway line, using rubble and debris as a low, nearly invisible firing position. It's a spot few would check, because it looks too exposed. Zaitsev and his spotter Kulikov settle in for a long wait, concealed in a nearby shell crater. They stay motionless for hours, watching how light changes on surfaces, how shadows move, and whether any part of the suspected hide betrays even the tiniest movement. In sniper warfare, patience isn't just a virtue, it's the difference between hunter and corpse. The climax of the story hinges on a single glint of light. As the sun rises higher, Zaitsev claims he sees a brief sparkle from the suspected German position, light reflecting off a scope or binocular lens beneath the metal sheet. It's the tiny mistake he's been waiting for. He resists the urge to fire immediately, fearing a decoy. Instead, he and Kulikov stage their own trick. Kulikov raises his helmet on a stick, just enough to suggest a careless movement. A shot rings out, smashing the helmet. The German believes he's killed his target. In reality, he's revealed his firing line. Zaitsev focuses on the point where the reflection came from, estimating where a human head would be behind the cover. He fires a single round. According to the account, the metal sheet jolts, then goes still. Later, they find a dead German sniper beneath it, identified as Major König. With that shot, the legend says, the duel ends. That's the story as it's usually told. But how historically solid is it? When historians began digging, they hit problems. First, there are no surviving German records confirming a Major Erwin König in charge of a sniper school in Berlin. Some have suggested the name might be a mistranslation of König or rank confusion. Maybe he was a captain, not a major. But even then, documentation is thin. Second, early Soviet wartime reporting about Zaitsev never mentions this dramatic duel. The detailed story only appears later, notably in his memoir and in post-war Soviet literature. That timing raises questions about whether the duel was embellished or even partly invented to strengthen the heroic narrative. Some researchers propose a middle ground. Perhaps Zaitsev did kill a skilled German sniper in a prolonged hunt, and over time the event was polished into a one-on-one showdown with a named elite rival. The line between battlefield memory and myth is rarely clean, especially in total war. The duel's fame exploded beyond archives largely thanks to pop culture, especially the 2001 film Enemy at the Gates. The movie turned Zaitsev and König into almost mythic figures, framing the entire Battle of Stalingrad around their personal rivalry. In the film, characters like Commissar Danilov become central emotional anchors. Love stories intertwine with sniper hunts, and timeline details are heavily compressed or rearranged. The duel itself is turned into a suspense thriller with elaborate cat-and-mouse sequences and a final standoff in a train yard. Cinematically, it's powerful. Historically, it's extremely loose. The movie cherry-picks elements from Zaitsev's memoir, a 1973 book by William Craig, and broader Stalingrad histories, then dramatically amplifies them. For many viewers, though, this fictionalized version becomes their default mental image of Stalingrad. That's not inherently bad, but it means we need to separate what works on screen from what the sources actually support, especially when real people and real suffering are involved. Stepping back from the duel, it's crucial to understand that snipers in Stalingrad weren't lone wolves operating in a vacuum. Both sides built sniper schools right in the city, training soldiers in camouflage, target selection, and urban stalking. Zaitsev himself is credited with training dozens of new snipers, who in turn trained others, what Soviet sources called a sniper movement. These shooters learned to aim not at random soldiers, but at officers, machine gun crews, radio operators, anyone whose loss would cause maximum disruption. The psychological effect was immense. German soldiers reported feeling watched constantly, afraid to light a cigarette or look over a parapet. On the Soviet side, propaganda highlighted sniper heroes as proof that a single determined person could halt the enemy advance. Stalingrad's snipers didn't win the battle alone. Artillery, logistics, and strategic blunders mattered far more, but they became one of its most haunting symbols, embodying the intimate personal horror of industrial war. There's also an uncomfortable ethical dimension to all this. Sniper stories are often told with a sense of awe, about patience, precision, and individual skill, but at their core they are stories about carefully planned killing, often of people who never see their attacker. In Stalingrad, both sides used snipers to terrorize the enemy and to pick off medics, officers, and anyone crucial to keeping units functional. From a strictly military perspective, that's effective. From a human perspective, it's deeply disturbing. Zaitsev later lived a relatively quiet life, working in industry, carrying the physical and psychological scars of the war. We don't have König's side, or even firm proof he existed, but there were countless German and Soviet snipers whose names we'll never know, who also lived or died with what they'd done. Remembering the duel as legend is easy. Remembering it as part of a brutal, dehumanizing siege, where civilians and soldiers alike were ground up in the machinery of war, is much harder and more honest. Let's pull the threads together. The sniper showdown at Stalingrad sits at the crossroads of fact, memory, and myth. We have a real person, Vasily Zaitsev, whose confirmed skill as a sniper, leadership, and training work are well documented. We have a real battle, Stalingrad, where snipers played an important, if limited, role in a gigantic struggle. On top of that, we have a compelling narrative, two elite marksmen stalking each other through ruins, each representing their nation. It's cinematic, easy to retell, and fits perfectly into wartime propaganda needs. But when historians examine the evidence for Major König and the precise details of the three-day duel, the trail thins out. So, likely, some kind of prolonged sniper hunt happened. Legendary one-on-one duel with a named German super sniper, far less certain. The key takeaway is this: powerful war stories often blend reality and storytelling. Understanding where one ends and the other begins helps us honor the real suffering without getting lost in romanticized violence. If you've stayed with this story to the end, you're exactly the kind of viewer this channel is built for: curious, skeptical, and willing to sit with complexity instead of easy answers. We unpacked the brutal context of Stalingrad, traced the rise of Vasily Zaitsev from shepherd to sniper instructor, and followed the legendary duel through the ruins, then put that legend under a historian's microscope. Along the way, we saw how propaganda, memoir, and movies like Enemy at the Gates transformed a murky episode into a sharp, unforgettable narrative. If you want more deep dives that separate cinematic legend from the archival record, whether it's other WW2 battles, ancient empires, or Cold War standoffs, now is a good time to subscribe and ring the notification bell. It genuinely helps this kind of long-form, research-heavy content survive on YouTube. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do legendary duels like this help us engage with history or risk glamorizing something that should horrify us? I'll be reading.